Hello, everyone, and welcome to another exciting edition. My name is Rhoda, and today we're going to be learning how to draft some basic designs, many simple designs, foundational designs, where you can then improve on. Okay, so today I just want to show us how we can draft a basic skirt. So what are the tools that we need? We need our pattern paper, a brown paper. It could be a brown paper. It could also be a white paper. It could be any kind of paper whatsoever, as long as you are able to transfer it to a fabric. So I have a brown paper here. I have my pencil, I have my ruler and my paper scissors. What I mean by paper scissors is that it is just a regular scissors that I only use on paper. I don't use it on fabric. So you should have a separate scissors for your fabric and then your paper. You don't want to use the same scissors you use on paper and fabrics as well. Okay. So we're getting right to it. What are the measurements you need for making a basic skirt? You need your waist measurement. That is your band, where you want the skirt to rest. You need your waist. You need your hip measurement, and then the skirt length. You need your band or your waist, your hip, and then the skirt length. I'm going to be working with waist 30, hip 40, and then skirt length 25. Let me check what I have on my paper to be sure of the length. Okay. I'll do a skirt length of 22 for the purpose of this class. 22. Okay. Now, when you want to draft anything, ensure you have all of these tools that I mentioned. And then you also need a calculator, because we're going to be doing some mathematics here. So you need your calculator, you need your ruler, you need your paper scissors, you need your pencil, your pattern paper, and then your measuring tape as well. Okay. And in some cases, you also need a flexible curve. My ruler is quite flexible, so I can use it in areas where I need curve. My ruler is a flexible ruler. Okay. So you also need a flexible curve, because our bodies are made of curves. We have curves around our bodies. So we usually need a flexible curve. I'll start. Now, for whenever we want to draft, we usually draft on fold. What I mean by fold is that you have to fold your pattern paper, because you are drafting for both sides. On your body, you are drafting for both your left side and the right side. So and then you can't just spread out the paper this way. You can just fold it. So because what we have here is the same thing we have on the other side. What you have on your right side is what you have on the left side as well. So you can just fold your paper and then you would be able to draft for both sides. So the measurements I need, like I said, I'll be working with waist 30, hip 40, and then length 22. Okay, 30, 40, 22. We're going to divide that waist 30 by 4. Waist 30 will be divided by 30 divided by 4 is what? 7.5. 40 divided by 4 as well is what? 40 divided by 2 is 20. 20 divided by 2 is 10. So 40 divided by 4 is 10. Okay. So I need. After dividing by 4, check the bigger one. Which one is the biggest among your measurements? What I have here, my waist divided by 4 is 7.5. My hip divided by 4 is 10. So the hip is obviously bigger than the waist. So that is the measurement I would be working with. What I mean is that every other measurement can fit into what I have here. Every other measurement, every other part, every other smaller part can fit into that my hip, which is the biggest part on my body right now. Okay, so 40 divided by 10, 40 divided by 4, sorry, is 10. So that is what I will use in folding my pattern paper. I'll fold my pattern paper into this way. I will check if I have my 10 measurement. Yes, I have 10 here. Okay. I will not just fold on 10. I will add what we call seam allowance. Seam allowance, meaning sewing allowance. You're going to sew on both the right side and the left side. You're going to be joining them because we are cutting the front and back separately. So you're going to have your seam allowance. So instead of just folding on 10, I will add a seam allowance of 2 inches. So I will be folding on 12 inches. 12 inches. I have 12 here. Okay. So I fold on 12. Check your measurement 12. I'm sure you have 12. I have 12 here. Okay. Then we can start imputing all the sizes. We are starting with the waist. A basic skirt is one of the simplest skirts you can make. I will be starting with the waist. The waist is what I will have at the very top. My waist is at the very top here. This is where I will measure my waist at the very top of my paper. Then I will get my hip line. If you can remember what we learned in measurements, how we took our measurements the other day, your hip line is the distance from your waist, wherever your skirt will rest, from your waist to the point on your hip, the biggest part on your hip. Okay, so my hip line for the purpose of this class is 10 inches. So I will come here and measure 10 inches. I will add an allowance of ½ inch to it because we'll be joining a band to the waist. I'll be joining a band to the waist here. So I will need to provide that allowance. I need to provide ½ inch for the joining. It might be a band. It might just be that you just want to tape the waist, but because we're not going to leave the waist as it is. So we need that allowance. So at the very top is where I have my waist. The distance from my waist to my hip is called hip line, and that is I am using 10 for it. So I added ½ inch, making 10.5. 10.5 on this side. Note how I am taking this measurement. I am taking this measurement this way, vertically, this way, for the hip line. So I'll go back to my waist. I'll go back to my waist this way. Now check. See, I am placing my tape this way now, horizontally. My waist is 30. 30 divided by 4 is 7.5. 7.5. There is something we call darts. Darts. What are darts? DARTS. Darts are used to control fullness. Around anywhere you have some fullness that you may not really need, you would use a dart to control it. It also helps to give fitting to clothes. Darts, DARTS. So we're going to be having darts on our skirt. Every basic skirt has darts. So I will include the dart allowance to the waist. So instead of just marking 7.5, I will add 1 inch dart allowance. That makes it what? 8.5, right? Now I'm not going to just leave it as 8.5. I would also add 2 inches or 1.5. You might decide on whatever inch you want for your seam allowance, sewing allowance, either 1.5 or 2 inches, just to have enough for your sewing allowance. But you don't want it so much. Don't use beyond 2 inches. It shouldn't be so much. So you don't have the hip area or the waist area so bulky. We don't want it looking so bulky from inside. So my waist 30 inches divided by 4 is 7.5. Okay, plus 1 inch dart allowance. That makes it 8.5. Okay, then I could just do 1.5 for my sewing allowance. So this is 8.5 here. 8.5 plus 1.5. So what do I have? I have 11 inches. 11 inches on the waist. I will be moving to the hip now. Hip line, let's not forget that our hip line is 10 inches plus the half inch for the joining allowance is 10.5. Then on your hip, you measure your hip, that's your hip circumference of your hip. Circumference of your hip divided by 4. My hip is 40. Divided by 4 is 10. Plus the 2 inches seam allowance. That makes it 12. Then I'll mark that 12 on my hip line. Exactly on my hip line. Then I'll come to the end of my paper, which is the skirt length. I said I'll be using length 22. Length 22 for the purpose of this class. This is where 22 is. Okay. Then I will add what we call hemming allowance. That is the allowance you use to finish the skirt at the end. So instead of marking on 22, I will mark on 24. 24. Now I'll come to this other end. Don't forget what I have here on the hip is 12 inches. That's my hip divided by 4 plus 2. Now, because most skirts are not straight, if you're working with this, if you're making just a straight skirt, making a straight skirt on the skirt length, you can just maintain what you have on your hip as the measurement on your length as well. If you are working on a straight skirt, so I have 12 inches here. I will just maintain the 12 inches at the end of the skirt here as well. But what we are making is a pencil skirt. But let me just see if I'm doing a straight skirt, this is what I would have. I would have 12 as well here. So you mark 12 as well on your hemming and then join. I'm joining now from my waist to the hip. And on the hip, I bring it down to the hem. That is for a straight skirt, please. So if it was just a straight skirt, I would just go down straight that way. But what we are doing today is a pencil skirt. So I'm not going to maintain 12 inches there. I would take out 2 inches because I want it really sharp, the pencil skirt. So instead of maintaining 12 inches on the hem, I would take out 2 inches and make that 10 inches. Here. As you can see, I am measuring from the midpoint, from the center of my paper. You remember I folded my paper. So all measurements are coming from that end. So for my pencil skirt, I'll come right back to my hip. And then measure down. As you can see, we have something sharp here now. Let me make it dark so you can see it well. If you notice that you have a sharp point around your hip. Ensure you use your flexible curve. Ensure you use your flexible curve to curve it out. We don't need any sharp point. My ruler is flexible, so I can use it. We don't need any sharp points on your clothes. So I will cut this out now. After cutting it, I will show us how to impute our dart. So this is our pencil skirt. Very simple, right? This is what a pencil skirt looks like. Look at it. No sharp ends. No sharp ends. We're not done. So let me show us how to increase our darts. Now, how to impute your darts? You need to first of all divide your waist. You know, the dart comes from the waist and then it goes down. It doesn't usually get to the hip. It's usually about 2 inches away from the hip. Because you're not actually controlling any fullness around your hip. Like I said, darts are used to control fullness. Your hip is full enough, so it's controlling itself. 10 inches. The hip line is 10 inches. So the length of your dart is going to be 8 inches. Because I said we're going to take out 2 inches from the hip line. So you come again from the midpoint. You can divide your waist by 8. When you divide your waist by 8, it helps you know where to put your dart. Yeah, you may want to ask me why 8. Okay, because we want, you know that when you divide, your body is divided into 2 parts, the front and the back, your front side, your back side. Okay. Now in front, you can further divide your front as well into another 2 parts. You have the left and the right. Okay, that's why we usually fold our paper into 2. Right now, I am cutting just the front piece of this skirt. So we have the right and the left. So in between that right and left is where you're going to place your dart. In the middle of when you divide your front side into 2 parts, you have your left and your right. Now on each of those parts, in between those 2 parts is where you would have your dart. That is why we usually divide the waist by 8 to get the dart placement. Front and back, that's 2. Front, then we have the front now. Then you can then further divide the front into 2 as well. That's 4. Okay. And then that 4 that you divided, you will now get the midpoint of those 4. That is why we usually divide by 8. So for me, I'll do 3.5. I'm coming again from the midpoint. 3.5, that is where your dart will start from. Okay. Then from there, after marking where you have the 3.5, then you take 1 inch from that point. Don't forget we added 1 inch allowance for the dart. 3.5 from here. And then after that point, we measure 1 inch. Then from that point, I check where I have my 8 inches. That's the length of my dart. The length of my dart, 8 inches. 8 inches. So from that point, you measure down, make it look like you are drawing a triangle, because the end point of your dart needs to be sharp. So that's my dart. I've usually divided body by 8, waist by 8. So again, I would measure my 3.5. And then 1 inch away from the 3.5. And that's my draft measurement. I'll go down by 8 inches to get my length, draft length, and measure my dart. Don't forget that it has to be sharp. So that's my dart. Then there is something we usually do in front. You will come to your midpoint here, and measure 1 inch downwards. 1 inch. The waist part of your dress, of your skirt in front is usually not straight. I'm not going to leave it this straight. It has to be curved, but just in front. We don't do it to the back. We don't do it to the back piece. Okay? Just in front. Then I'll curve this out. I'll take this up to the end of my waist this way. So let me show us how to draft the back piece. We don't have to do all of this for the back. We'll simply fold another pattern paper. And place the one that we've drafted on the new pattern paper. And the only thing you are doing differently is that you would add your zipper allowance to the back. Zip allowance is usually around 1.5 to 2 inches. You can do 1.5, you can do 2 inches. So after folding, I'll place the one that has already been drafted on it. I leave out my zipper allowance. Zipper allowance is usually on the fold point. $1.5 is fine. Okay. Then I'll use this to cut it out. Ensure you have all your measurements correctly, done correctly. Okay. So that's it. The dots will be at the back as well. So I'll use the front piece to get replacement for the dart for the back piece. I'll just do it. So you don't really have to go ahead to do all of these measurements for the back again. Since we've done it in front, you could just replicate it at the back this way. Now don't forget how I took 1 inch downwards in front for the curve in front. So I'll take that out. Just for the front, please. We don't do it at the back. This is a pencil skirt, the front piece of a pencil skirt, and this is the back. So I would also take out the dart here, 8 inches long. Okay. And then the dart for the back one as well. 8 inches long too. That's that about skirts. Very simple. These patterns will then be transferred to a fabric, and then we can join it. These patterns will be transferred to a fabric, and then we can join it. It's very simple. Basic skirt is one of the simplest skirts you can make. Very simple to make. We don't need a lot of measurements, just your waist, your hip line, your hip circumference, and your skirt length, and then the darts. Very, 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 very simple. Let me show you how to draft a basic top. Also, very simple to make. Measurements needed: shoulder, bust, waist. Your shoulder, your bust, and your waist. Basic top. There are other types of tops. There are other styles of tops. Okay, but you need to first of all get your basic top before you can then go to other ones. Your shoulder. We usually fold our fabrics into two. We usually fold our paper into two as well, just like we did for the skirt, because we are cutting for both sides. We are cutting for both your right and your left side. But we are starting with the front piece. You cut your front before you cut the back. After getting the front, you just place your pattern paper on another folded fabric, input your zipper allowance, and then you cut the back. Very simple as well. So I'll start by measuring the shoulder. My shoulder is 15. Shoulder, you remember how I taught us how to take measurements of shoulder? 15. So you divide your shoulder by 2, 7.5. From the midpoint as well, 7.5. I'll add 1 inch seam allowance in case I need to trim out anything. So we always add some of the seam allowance just in case we need to trim out something, need to make some amendments, make some corrections. So I'm not going to just leave it at 7.5. I would make it 8.5. 8.5. Now there's something we call shoulder drop. Your shoulder is not straight. When you take a look at your shoulder, from your neck area to your shoulder, you would notice that it is a bit slanty. Yes, it's not usually straight. We make it straight only when we want to use the shoulder pad. Okay, but we're not using shoulder pad here. So when you take a look at your neck, then to your right to your shoulder, you would notice that it drops a bit. There's something we call shoulder drop. So from that shoulder that I just measured, I will take my tape down this way, my tape facing down vertically this way, and measure 1 inch or 1.5. Depends on how big the person is. For children, most times we use about 1 inch. For adults, for people on the big side, we use 1.5 for them. And then you take your ruler and connect from that point, from that shoulder drop, to the midpoint of your paper. To the midpoint of your paper that way. Then on that point, I would measure my armhole. Always divide your armhole by 2. I taught us how to take measurements of the armhole. So my armhole is 16. From that point, I will take it down. 16 divided by 2 is 8. I'll measure 8 inches down this way. Okay. And they connect it. And take it to the end of my paper. This way. Now the armhole is usually not straight. From this point here, from this angle here, from that angle, I will measure inwards by 1 inch because I want to create a curve around here. I'll take it in by 1 inch. And then I'll check the armhole as well. Get the midpoint of my armhole. You know, I told you my armhole is 16 divided by 2 is 8. I measured it down this way. So on this I'll get I'll measure out and then connect all of these points. I need a curve around here. That is why I'm that's why I'm taking out all of this. I took out one inch from this angle here. I took in 1 inch from this angle here. I also measured ½ inch outwards on this point. So I will connect all of these points to form a curve. So from the very beginning, from the top here, use a flexible curve for this. I'll connect this way. And then from that point as well, I will connect to where I took in 1 inch this way, and then to the end of my paper. That's my armhole. So you get your bust line. Don't forget that we also have to fold the biggest part on the bodies. So the upper part of your body is called bodies, B-O-D-I-C-E. B-O-D-I-C, bodies. And the lower part where we have the skirt is called the bottom, or you can call it skirt area. So the biggest part on my bodies is my bust. So if you want to work with bust, let's say 36 divided by 4. 36 divided by 2 is 18. 18 divided by 2 is 9. So 36 divided by 4 is 9. My bust line is also 10 inches, but I will not work with 10 inches. I need ½ inch sewing allowance. So when you're trying to impute your hip line, bust line, waistline, always make sure you add ½ inch at least because of the joining. We are going to be joining this top on the shoulder. We're going to be joining the back to the front. So we need ½ inch sewing allowance for that. So instead of just marking on 10 inches, I would mark 10.5 because I need ½ inch for my sewing allowance on the shoulder. So on this point, I will measure my bust measurement. My bust measurement, my bust circumference is 36. 36 divided by 4 is 9. 9. So instead of just marking 9, I will do 9 plus 2 inches. The 2 inches is for my seam allowance. Seam allowance by the side. Sewing allowance. So instead of 9, I would mark 11. 9 plus 2 is 11. And then my waistline. So this particular top is stopping on my waist. My waistline is 15. I'll add 1 inch, just 1 inch to it, because I intend to join it to the skirt to make it look like a dress. So what is a dress? A dress is basically a top and a skirt joined together. So what we have just done today, we have drafted a basic skirt, and we are drafting a basic bodice now, which is a top or a blouse. When we are done drafting all of this, when we join these two together, we have just drafted a dress. Very simple, right? Pencil dress. So on my waistline, don't forget that my waist measurement, we used 30 on the skirt. So we're going to be using the same 30 here. 30 divided by 4 is 7.5. 7.5 plus 2 inches seam allowance. You can make it 3 inches because you're going to be having darts on the blouse as well. 7.5 plus 3 is 10.5. 10.5 this way. So we'll join all of these points together. We're joining the waist to the bust, and then take it up to the armhole. This way. The waist to the bust, and then up to the armhole, straight up to the armhole. I want to blend the waist well, so I can have something straight around here. So I'll cut all of this out. I'm just blending this in so that we can see what I have here well. This is the armhole. You can see how I've already carved it out. Okay. And then the shoulder. This is the basic top. The armhole, the seam allowance point, and then the hem. So that's the basic top. Let me teach us how to draft the neckline or neck. So normally the neckline, for most people, you would have to measure the person's neckline. You take your tape round. When we're taking measurements, I taught us how to take the tape round the person's neck. For me, I'll be using a neckline of 15. Neckline 15. So after getting your neckline, you don't have to use that particular neckline exactly. It depends on the kind of neck the person wants. You might have a V neckline, a round neckline, a U neckline, different kinds of neckline. There are different kinds of necklines. Neckline is that thing that's the part of the dress that really elevates the style. You could have a very simple basic dress, but with a really outstanding neckline. The neckline just takes it up to another level. There are different kinds of neckline. Okay. So these are some of the things. Most are usually so basic, but it is when we begin to impute some of these things, some of these little touches here and there. We call it wow factor. There's usually a wow factor. When you are making anything, ensure you have a wow factor on it. It could just be the neckline. It could be the sleeve, the kind of sleeve you decide to take. Okay, so you don't really have to do so much when it comes to clothes. Don't do really so much, so it doesn't look so busy. But make sure you have something that will make people say, oh, wow, this is lovely. It could just be a very nice neckline that you decide to use, okay? Or a really nice sleeve, okay? It does not have to be, okay, oh, this has to be nice, that has to be nice. When you have a lot going on a dress, it might make it look so busy, or you might look too dressy. We don't want that. So you should be comfortable with whatever you are wearing. So after imputing my basic neckline, which is, I said I'm going to use a neckline of 15. To get that 15, I would measure maybe 2.5 from this point. And then 2.5 also on this point. And now, you remember all my vertical measurements have ½ inch. half inch for the joining allowance. So I will add half inch to the part of the neckline that is coming downwards. So instead of using 2.5 on this point, I will use 3 inches on the neckline, the part that is coming down. Then I'll connect it with a flexible curve. I'm connecting the neckline here. Okay, I'll take this out. So that's the neckline. Okay, so my father now decides to make my neckline a V-neck, a U-neck, any kind of neck, because this one is just a basic shirt neckline. Just a basic shirt neckline. It's just so small. Okay, so from this point, I can just bring it down a bit. How do you do that? You just add some inches to the depth of the neck, to the wideness, the width of the neck. I can just add, like, let's say 2 inches. It depends on how low you want it. There is no rule, there is no formula for this. Just maybe 2 inches to the depth, and then probably another 1 inch to the width. And then I'll use my ruler again. Even if it is a V neckline, it doesn't have to be so sharp. We usually don't encourage anything sharp, any part of your body, apart from the darts. Most times, I think darts is the only part that is sharp. Every other part has to be a bit curved, because we have curves going on around our body. So this will give me a V neckline. This is how it looks before I open. And then I'll open it. So let's not forget that our blouse also requires darts. We need that on our blouse. So the dart comes from the end here up. It goes up, pointing towards the bust. It points towards the bust, but it doesn't get to the bust, because we're also not, we're not trying to control any fullness around our bust. So I'll again come to my midpoint. You remember I used 3.5 on my waist, on the skirt. I will also get 3.5 here, because the darts on your basic bodies, which is the blouse and the skirt, the darts should meet on your waistline. So we're going to be using the same measurement, 3.5 from the midpoint and 1 inch away from it. I'll do that to the other side as well. 3.5 from the midpoint and 1 inch away from it. And then I take it up. Before you can know where to stop, check the distance from your waist to your bust line. This is about 5.5 inches. I don't need that getting to my bust line. I don't need it getting to my bust line. Let me draw a line on the bust so it helps to guide me. I don't need a dart on the bust. What do I have here? Yes, about 5.75 thereabout. So to get the length of my dart, you just take away 2 inches away from the bust line. What do I have here? I have 4 inches left. So the length of the dart now, we're going to be using 4 inches for the purpose of this class. So that's the height of the dart. It shouldn't be longer than 4 inches, so it doesn't get to your bust. We don't need it on our bust. So I have my triangle. That's my dart. for the blouse. I'll do the same here. Don't forget that we are using 4 inches, 4 inches for the height of our dart. Okay. One last dart, one that comes from the bust. We call it bust dart. So for a basic top like this, we have the waist dart and then the bust dart. From your armhole here, you measure 2.5 or 2 inches, 2 inches, 2.5 there. Depends on how big the person is. 2.5 downwards, and then 1 inch as well. You draw a dart. The dart should come. Thank God we have a line on our bust line. So the dart should be pointing at your bust line. And the length of the dart plus, you have your sewing allowance on your top. The length of the dart here is about 5.5. So look at it. Bust dart. So times when you get a ready-to-wear dress, you would see, if you've noticed, you would see a dart just around your armhole. Yes, that's what we call the bust dart. So for ready-to-wear clothes, we have just two darts on the bust, on the blouse, on the bodies. That's the bust dart and the waist dart. So that's it. Our basic bodice is done. Basic bodice is done. This is the top. I'll place this on another one to cut the back piece. When we cut the back piece, we just add the zipper allowance to it. And then our skirt. So this top plus this skirt equals a dress. This top and this skirt equals a dress. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for having me. In our next class, we'll be learning how to sew it. We'll transfer it to the fabric and then learn how to sew. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure being into this class. Thank you.
Well done, well done, well done. Thank you so much. Thank you. 1625.
Yes,
God bless you.
yes, ma'am. Amen. Thank you so much.